The year the Constitution took effect, Thomas Jefferson wrote, "Every Constitution and every law naturally expires at the end of 19 years." So, is it time to rewrite the US Constitution?
I mean, what would that even look like? A new constitutional convention? Probably just some poli-sci PhDs making a system just as disconnected as the one we have now, I guess. But what if it wasn't? I mean, what if the people actually got to design their own government and not just, well, academic types who look like me? Someone's had to think of that before me, right? Huh. I guess not. So I actually tried this. I made a Google Doc with the US Constitution in simple terms and a Spanish version. And then I passed around that link that anyone could comment their suggestions on to all of the political classes and clubs at my university, thinking they'd be the most likely to hop on it. And then I waited, and nothing. Although, to be fair, I guess most people don't really want extra homework. So screw it. This is what I would do. Feel free to tear it apart. Okay, so first things first, let's get the biggest swing out of the way. We replace elections with sortition, where any adult citizen can volunteer and be randomly selected for public office. Okay, wait. Hear me out. I know, it's a little crazy, just bear with me for a second. Currently, our system tries to avoid tyranny by having only a few representatives with limits on their power. The issue is, this means that these few people represent a huge number of others, and over time, gain more power. Because they're also elected publicly, they have to spend half, if not more, of their term preparing for re-election campaigns to hold on to that power. And companies and other outside interests are more able to recognize who is and will be in power and exploit them for their own benefit. But what if we flipped it? What if we shared governmental power among more representatives in a committee structure? So we increase the number of representatives in the House and Senate to represent the interests of their state in only a specific interest committee. Then, once that committee has agreed upon a bill, they pass it to the corresponding committee in the other house, where it can be approved or rejected with notes, and if it passes there, it's finally voted on by the general public in annual universal elections, which would be a paid federal holiday. And if these representatives are randomly selected volunteers, then companies and vested interests wouldn't know who to target. Since no one representative would have enough influence to skew the system one way or the other, companies would have to buy out committee members from both houses and convince the general populace to approve new legislation. Also, by not allowing any representative to serve multiple times in a row, we take out the incentive to act solely to maintain your own power. But just to be safe and to make sure people are volunteering for the right reasons, let's only pay our representatives the federal minimum wage, which, remember, they're going to get to set. That way, they have an incentive to make a livable minimum wage, but one that isn't so big that it breaks the system and falls back on their heads. I know people may think that we'll lose the experts and their opinions in politics, but if they're getting involved because they truly care about the expertise area and the direction of the American government, I think they'll still volunteer. With all these different representatives working in different committees, clear, productive communication would be a bit of a challenge in just one big building. Plus, if we want anyone to be able to volunteer, we can't just ask your everyday American to be able to move all the way to Washington for a short-term job paying minimum wage. But nowadays, we have the technology to be able to operate virtually. With each committee having roughly 50 members, and one of whom could be selected to help conduct the meeting, and that spot could rotate just so that there's not one representative who's able to bias discussions.
It would also mean that representatives could live in the communities they actually represent. In fact, we could make that a requirement. That, paired with the ability to stream all of the congressional committee discussions, except maybe sensitive information for national defense and stuff like that, for any American to see, means we could finally take the walls off the room where it happened, and it wouldn't be so hard to hold representatives accountable. In fact, if something did arise, some charge of corruption or collusion, it wouldn't be charged against some highly connected, super powerful politician, but just a regular citizen volunteer. One extra benefit would possibly be the expansion of broadband internet and Wi-Fi services to more rural areas to make participation more equal. For individuals who don't have access to the technology you'd need, there could be a public center like a public library or a government office that holds an office space for them to come use the computer technology, or even just to meet with constituents in person. Boom, we've got Congress figured out. But what about the executive branch? I mean, we're at least going to keep the president, right?
Wrong.
Well, the executive would also be a committee of about 50 representatives, still all randomly selected, so no one person, again, has any disproportionate power. And because all of the laws in our new system are approved by the popular vote of the people, the purpose of the executive will be closer to the original purpose of the presidency, which was to enforce existing laws, appoint justices and officers, and to help with foreign relations stuff. Now, this could also help combat the growing trend of executive orders being used to make unilateral governmental decisions and actions. Oh, and about the Supreme Justices, let's not do life terms, right? Just staggered term end dates so we're not appointing all the court at the same time. Now, honestly, the executive committee is probably the most vulnerable to exploitation because someone really rich could bribe them for an appointment. But even then, all the justices and officials would still be making minimum wage. But still, we'd probably want some pretty extreme oversight. And it might actually help keeping everyone local because then we can just take them down the street. Local courts could try cases of abusing civic power, collusion, corruption, bribery, which any citizen could sue an office holder for. If the official was found guilty, then they'd be excluded from holding office for however long the jury decided and have to pay a fine. On the flip side, if the person who sued them was found to have knowingly lied or brought the case maliciously, then they'd be excluded from office and have to pay the fine. That fine could be paid to the federal government for federal positions and local government for local ones. So here's the thing. City and state governments may not get as much attention all the time, but they're meant to be your main governmental power, to let locals directly decide what happens in their communities. So we're gonna go ahead and give them a little more strength than you may expect here, but just bear with me and I promise not to make this video too long. Let's go ahead and apply the same sortition system that we did to the federal government to our city and state governments. That includes mayors and governors being committees. We'll let the cities and states decide how big, and they could still meet virtually if they wanted, or they could meet in person in a publicly accessible place with enough notice before each meeting to let any community members come and participate. We could still record so that it could be streamed and maintain that transparency and accountability. And that could just be a backup too if the virtual was having any technical issues. All that said, this is where we get a little crazy. Stick with me. So, community land trusts are collectively owned plots of land that are held by a nonprofit democratic organization to help prevent against, increasing rent, speculation, and help community members get secure housing. people still buy their homes, they still are able to build equity, they just don't own the land itself. What if we did something like that nationwide, allowing our local city governments to own the land in specific land committees that are operated by our volunteer representatives in the community and operated as a town hall, allowing residents to have a say in what's going to happen to the land in their area directly. Now, this wouldn't just help with housing, but it means companies wouldn't be able to come in, buy up land and the associated resources, and essentially strip them from the communities. When there come time for questions of eminent domain or anything like that, people would be able to look out for one another by having a direct say, knowing that if a question were to arise about their home, it would be up to the same friends that they've made who were defending them. If power is derived from land, this would allow that power to be equally shared among all Americans. There is one other thing, it's a bit economic, that I want to get your thoughts on. Come on. Automation is a pretty big concern for a lot of Americans. It cuts costs for corporate leaders by cutting jobs for everyone else. The issue is, technology is a lot like the atomic bomb. Once we make it, we can't really go back. But we could turn the car. If we all had access to mass production and mass delivery, no one would be excluded from the modern market due to a lack of wealth.
Ew.
So what if we do automate those more monotonous jobs, but we make them public options?
Oh my God!
Basically, the local government could provide mass production and mass delivery services that are automated to local businesses who apply for them through presenting to those town halls we were talking about before. Not only would this give the opportunity for the local business to expand its production and sale at a lower cost, but it would also, through presenting to their community, give them the opportunity to gauge how much interest is in the local market so that we can avoid wasting resources for the individual or the community as a whole.
I have absolutely no interest in this business. I'm out.
I'm out.
That way, we could increase opportunities for individuals to grow their own economic success and help develop more fulfilling jobs by helping them compete with those larger companies. The payment for these services could even be scalable to match the growth of the company and might even help us reduce the excessive reliance on heavy taxes by allowing the government to generate its own revenue with these services to fund its operations.
This is so horrible. How do you think this has any chance of surviving and working? I hate this so much, it's incredible. It's one of the worst ideas I've ever seen. I'm out.
Obviously, the biggest issues with this idea is the cost of putting these options into place to begin with, and the potential for companies to outsource just to undercut them.
I'm out.
But ideally, it would give us a chance to break away from our reliance on these companies, which has us constantly subsidizing and offering tax cuts to them in the hopes that they don't leave the U.S. as it is.
That's what's killing this country when it's just common
I
sense
love this
stuff. It's
country.
ridiculous.
And no, I can't guarantee that, and I'm not an economist. Really, I don't know what I'm talking about. Huh. No, it's not just the economic stuff. I mean, honestly, I don't know much about, well, anything. So, I don't know. You tell me, what do you think? 250 years in, we've come pretty far. But it's up to us where we go next. And honestly, I can't wait to see it.